So if you can let me when you see the slides,
Yes,
we'll
perfect.
input.
Yes,
Cool.
ready to rock and roll.
Great. So listen, good to be on with everyone. I'll do a brief introduction into myself and then we'll go on the demo. So my name is John Hallahan. I lead a team in Fireblocks called Business Solutions for EMEA. What Business Solutions is essentially our internal consulting function. So my role is to support our customers in building out digital asset businesses and specifically in the TradFi space. So whether that's banks launching stablecoins, asset managers accepting, launching money market funds, launching stablecoins, FMIs accepting different types of stablecoins as collateral. They're the kind of flows that I'm trying to build with our customers on a daily basis. So hoping to give you an insight into the kind of things that we're seeing in the market and really just give you a sense of what Fireblocks is doing in the stablecoin space. So what I'll split the presentation into three different parts. The first one is just a little intro on Fireblocks for those of you who aren't familiar with us, what type of customers we're working with, what type of flows we're seeing in stablecoins and crypto. And then we'll get into a little bit around use cases of stablecoins that we're seeing, what role we play in the ecosystem, and then finally a couple of case studies at the end. And then, very happy to also answer questions in the Q&A section, and feel free to stick anything in the chat as well. Okay. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Fireblocks, Fireblocks is essentially a platform that enables all types of companies to build in the digital asset space. We've been around for around 7 years. And we're probably the most scaled infrastructure provider that you can find in digital assets. We've 2,000 institutional customers. We only serve B2B. Our customers are touching about 1 billion different customers, depending on the metrics that you look at. And to date, we've settled or processed around 7 trillion in digital assets since the platform has basically come into fruition. So lots of the flows that we're seeing around crypto, but also around stablecoins as well. What you've got on the slide, and I won't spend too much time on it, is the types of customers and industries that you're touching. So I think really any use case that you see in crypto, Fireblocks has a customer that's scaled in that space. So whether it's exchanges who are scaling offerings, whether it's asset managers who are launching money market funds like BlackRock, whether it's buying crypto on your neobank app with Revolut, all of this is kind of with Fireblocks as the base level infrastructure. We're also working a lot in payments. It's pretty much the fastest growing area that we see, around 400% year on year. And also working a lot with banks and governments and other types of institutions. So, probably too much to get into for this call, but let's specifically focus on stablecoins and what we're doing. So if you take Fireblocks as a platform for 2024, we processed around 3.5 trillion in digital assets in terms of the transactions that our customers are looking at. And around 1.6, 1.7 trillion of that was in stablecoins. So, that equates to basically 10 to 12% of all transactions for USDC and USDT as stablecoins. So we're seeing massive flows. And as a result of that, we're seeing quite a lot of use cases around stablecoins. And what we'll hope to share over the course of the presentation is some of those examples and exactly what we're looking at. So maybe just to take a step back for a second, the way that we see the ecosystem is kind of like an onion. So you've got multiple different layers. You'll see lots of different projects that are focused at the moment on crypto and stablecoins and tokenized deposits. But the way that we see the ecosystem in 5 years and 10 years, CBDCs at the base level of tokenized money. We'll see tokenized deposits that are being issued by banks and then stable coins on top. And basically the way that we see things moving in the next kind of 4, 5, 6 years is that the more types of cash that come on chain, the more efficiencies we're going to see and the more types of assets we'll see tokenized. So, this is our view of the future. We'll have carbon credits that are on chain. We'll have tokenized real world assets, tokenized bonds, stable coins being issued by banks, CBDCs being issued by central banks. And pretty much all of the projects that we're involved with at the moment are across these different layers. So what we'll talk through a little bit later in the presentation is what these types of projects are actually looking at. Okay, so a lot of people talk about stablecoins, but not a lot of people talk about the use cases. So, we see stablecoins like USDC, USDT, the great work that the guys at SocGen are doing with the Coinvertible and many other companies. But what are the use cases that people are actually using these for? So what I'll spend the next few minutes talking on is what these use cases are, who is doing them, and why it might be applicable to big businesses. Okay, so the first use case, and probably the one which is most interesting in early day stablecoin projects, is around corporate treasury. So if anyone's familiar with, working in a large company, moving money across borders is something which is pretty difficult to do. You've correspondent banking networks, you have settlements that can take 4, 5, 6 days, and then there's fees in the middle of that. So, one of the big use cases that we're seeing for stablecoins for companies is being able to move monies across borders really quickly. So we've worked with the National Australia Bank, who are one of the big banks in Australia, and the project and pilot that they had focused on was moving money between different subsidiaries. We see lots of other projects that are focusing on this as well, and we see this as really a good use case of stablecoins or tokenized money. Another really good use of stablecoins is providing access to USD banking and currency hedging. So if you look at the success of USDT, really what that provides users outside of the US, and particularly users with high inflationary currencies, is the ability to hedge or store value. So, obviously a lot of us will use Bitcoin to store value and hedge, but for people who are working in emerging markets, they want access to USD. And what stablecoins allow them to do really is get that access to USD and essentially on ramp into that piece. A third use case we're seeing is around cross-border commercial payments. So, let's take a couple of big banks, for example. So JP Morgan have launched their JPM coin. It's an internal tokenized deposit. It's essentially like a stable coin. And what they're focusing on doing is allowing their customers to move money across borders. Citibank has just announced in the last week a similar thing with their platform Citi Token Services. And what essentially these use cases are doing is providing B2B payments for customers of banks. So, you see a JPM coin on the slide. Another example is a customer of Fireblocks called Banking Circle, who's providing this exact use case with their MiCA compliant stablecoin, which is called Eurite. Another example is kind of just on-ramping into assets as well. So obviously, if anyone's bought crypto before, or certainly bought crypto 4 or 5 years ago, not necessarily the current UX that you would have, really tough way. It's a really tough way to on-ramp into the ecosystem. So, we're seeing lots of examples of stablecoins that are focusing on on-ramping. A big example of this is a customer of ours in South America called Bancolombia. So Bancolombia is the biggest retail bank in Colombia. They operate about 60% of the flows in the country. And what they've done is basically launched a subsidiary called Wenia to focus on offering crypto. So they've basically launched their own crypto exchange. And for them, their stablecoin that they've issued, COPW, which is a stablecoin pegged to the Colombian peso, is a way for their customers to safely on-ramp onto their exchange. So, we're seeing in emerging markets like Colombia and some Southeast Asian countries, stablecoins are really good at being able to on-ramp safely onto exchanges. And we see some banks who are launching in that space as well. We also see commercial payments. So it's a flavor of the cross-border commercial payments, but something which is domestic. So think about a company who has many different suppliers that they want to pay. This is an example of how stablecoins are being used in that flow as well. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. It's definitely one that's it's been growing over the last number of months. If you think about how you post collateral, and we're pretty in light of Bybit last week, this is a pretty popular topic. A lot of our customers are asking, how can we use digital assets to basically post collateral, and how can we do that in a safe way? And a lot of these projects are basically focused on stablecoins or yield-bearing assets like USYC from Hashnote. So we're also seeing the collateral posting use case as one that's being really important. We've actually launched a product called Off Exchange, which allows you to post collateral in your own custody and basically trade on the exchange. So, we're seeing a really interesting use of these types of use cases as well for stablecoins. Probably the most popular use case for stablecoins, and the one which has driven the most volume for us and the ecosystem as a whole, is around remittances. So, you're a Filipino national working in the UAE. You want to send money back to your family in the Philippines. You can use Western Union and pay 8%, or you can on-ramp to USDT or USDC and send it in a matter of 10 minutes. I know the option that I would choose would definitely be stablecoins. So we're seeing a big flow of stablecoins in that way as well. And then finally, and this is a little bit forward looking, but when you think about things like CBDCs, a big area of focus is programmable payments. So how can I have money which is smart? So, if I have money which is, if I have a stable coin which I've been issued by a bank, how can I use that to pay taxes, for example? If I have a CBDC which is issued by a government, how can I use that to pay for certain services? So we're starting to see early day projects on the programmable payment space, mainly in APAC for us as Fireblocks. But I think that's a really interesting use case to keep an eye on over the next couple of years as well. So we've gone through these quite quickly, but really just to give you a flavor of the different types of use cases we're seeing for stable coins, they're focused on mainly commercial use cases for big businesses who want to move money across borders. They're focused on the ability to use stable coins to on-ramp into some kind of crypto or onto an exchange in the collateral posting use case. And the third one is really retail facing, moving money across borders. And the main way we're seeing that is actually in remittances. Okay, so maybe a little bit about how we think about launching a stablecoin. So I think, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Fireblocks as an infrastructure delivers lots of different use cases. One of the main ones that we focus on is how a bank launches a stablecoin or a company launches a stablecoin. So I'll just walk you through at a very high level the kind of 3 key steps that we see in how you need to launch a stablecoin. So the first one is all around your smart contract. Being able to deploy a smart contract in a safe way and manage how that you select that is a kind of a key piece. As Fireblocks, we have a library of smart contracts that have already been audited that enable our customers to basically drag and drop from a stablecoin smart contract that's already been used and deployed in a matter of minutes. We actually had a company in Australia earlier this year go live with a stablecoin in 5 days. And, that might be something which takes 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks if you're building your smart contract yourself. So the first piece is all about deployment. The second piece is all around administration. And the way that I'd think about this is governance. So really, how do you manage governance for your stablecoin? Who has access to the smart contract? Who can perform roles like minting and burning? And how do you manage how you do KYC for stablecoins is another big piece. And then the final one is operations. So you've got your smart contract, you deployed it, and you've done your press release to say that you've launched a stablecoin. How do you actually manage that day to day? So how do you mint new tokens? How do you burn new tokens? How do you access different forms of liquidity? They're pieces which are kind of really important as well. And maybe just to, end on this piece in advance of the last slide, when you think about stablecoins, you normally think about the issuer. But what we find for very successful stablecoin projects is it's an ecosystem play, and it's actually a partnerships play. So what we try and do for our issuers of stablecoins is connect them to other ecosystem participants that they need to make their project successful. So obviously you've got customers, which is an obvious one. Lots of banks and companies who are launching stablecoins will have that. But there's other people you need. You need market makers to basically provide liquidity on different exchanges that you're listed on. You need to be able to connect to exchanges if you want your stablecoin to be one of those settlement assets, like we talked about in the use cases earlier. And in some circumstances, you'll want to connect to custodians. So if you have customers who are big companies who are holding stablecoins on their balance sheet, they're probably going to use a custodian. So when we're building stablecoin projects with customers that we have, which I'll talk about in a second, these are the types of building blocks that we see for each different project. So you might think a stablecoin is just about deploying a smart contract and minting and burning tokens, but really actually it's an ecosystem of different providers that you need to launch these quite successfully. And finally, let me talk about a minute or two on a couple of different projects that we have that I've alluded to earlier. So the first one I'll talk about is Bancolombia. So as I mentioned earlier, they launched a subsidiary called Wenia, which is a crypto exchange. They have launched a stablecoin using Fireblocks as their infrastructure, and it's how they manage their stablecoin and also their crypto business. And really what this has allowed Bancolombia to do is to on-ramp easily for their customers onto their exchange, and also integrate other pieces like proof of reserve, for example, which is basically proving that the reserves you have for your stablecoin are legitimate, and that's how you launch it. So you'll see an example of the types of features they're using in Fireblocks. They're using KYT, they're using Chainalysis, they're using the travel rule, they're connecting to market makers, they're connecting to liquidity, so all of the pieces that we've seen in the previous example. And then finally, banking circle. So it's great to see the guys from SG4, John, talking about their stablecoin. I think, the European market, we're going to see lots of different stablecoins being launched over the course of the next year. This is an example of one of the customers that we've helped in launching a MiCA compliant stablecoin, which is called Eurite. And basically what Banking Circle is using Fireblocks for is deploying their smart contract, managing how they mint and burn tokens, and having all those pieces around governance that they talked about earlier as well. So really, whistle stop tour for 15 minutes, but very happy to take questions, and hope that was clear for everyone. So thanks for your time, and looking forward to a few questions.
Thank you very much, John. There definitely are some questions. I think we won't be able to go through all of them, but it would be super cool if you could answer them afterwards. But there are
Sure.
two questions I would love to pick. The first one comes from Casper. He's asking you, what do you see as the biggest use case for Euro stablecoins? Where do you expect growth to come from?
I think probably twofold in what we're seeing. So we're working on maybe 5 or 6 different MiCA compliant stablecoin issuances at the moment, either single banks or banks who are working together in consortiums. They're mainly focused on 2 different use cases. So the first one is the stablecoin being used as a settlement asset. So think about posting collateral on exchanges, being used as a currency pair in crypto transactions. Think about those types of use cases. So I think that one is a big driver. Particularly as well, as you'll see that not many of the USD issuers have been registered outside of Circle. I think it's a big area of focus for European stablecoin issuers. The second one then is around more payments related use cases. So I think adding an additional asset to payments flows is what we're seeing for a lot of those use cases. So whether that's remittances, cross-border flows, we see that as a big one as well. The important thing to remember about stablecoins are the blockchain is just another payments rail. It's not going to be perfect for every use case. SEPA is really good if you want to send money in Europe. We're not going to use a stablecoin instead to send it. But if you're sending money to someone in a country that doesn't have traditional banking rails, that isn't connected, and is using correspondent banking, then stablecoins are a really good example of how you should use that. And that's pretty much the reason why Tether is sitting at over 150 billion in market cap. So that's the 2 that we're seeing focused on.
Awesome. Now with you mentioning Tether, but also the settlement and payment use cases, how should banks think about participating in stablecoins? Should they think or launch their own stablecoins, or should they partner up with some bigger issuers and maybe somehow negotiate a revenue share deal to participate in the upside? This question comes from Carl.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the last thing we want is 100 different Euro stablecoins. I don't think that's going to be the way forward. There's probably going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 that are quite dominant. So I think if you're going to be launching a stablecoin, you should think about a few different things. A, have I got a big enough customer base for this to be a viable business for me? So to get enough market cap. B, are there any other peers that I have that could add to this ecosystem? So if I'm a transaction bank, who are my counterparties? Are they other banks in different countries? Could I potentially add them to a consortium of people to actually play with? And then I think C, we should really focus on use cases that are delivering near-term value. So the reality is for stablecoins, the biggest value at the moment for European issuers is being a settlement asset for crypto. So if you can't be listing on exchanges and having partnerships with them, it's going to be difficult for you to get a big TVL. And then ultimately, you're not going to have a big enough market cap to have enough treasuries to make your yield on that afterwards. So I think there are 3 really important points. When we're advising banks who are issuing stables, when we're advising consortiums who are issuing them, they're the 3 pieces we focus on. And the people who are open about that and address those points really well, I think are going to be really successful. I think StockChain's a good example of this, right? They're listing on exchanges, they have a very clear use case, and they're launching across multiple chains. I think that's a great example of someone who's very clear about their strategy. They know how they want to be successful, and that's probably going to set them up for success. So we're trying to do the same with our customers.